There's a door beneath Denver International Airport that no passenger is supposed to see. Behind it, tunnels stretch for miles, wide enough to drive trucks through, built for reasons the official story can't quite explain. This airport sits on 53 square miles of land, twice the size it needed to be. Construction went $2 billion over budget, and the original contractor was fired after the first 5 buildings were completely buried underground. Not demolished, buried. Workers who helped build it talk about sections they weren't allowed to enter, areas cordoned off, even during construction. They describe tunnel systems with multiple levels descending far deeper than any baggage claim requires. Some of these workers signed ND, as that still bind them today. The airport opened in 1995, and from the beginning, something felt wrong. Strange murals cover the walls, depicting apocalyptic scenes, gas-masked soldiers, burning cities, children in coffins. A 32-foot statue of a blue horse with glowing red eyes killed its creator when part of it fell on him during construction. Locals call it Lucifer, and it watches over the runways like a guardian of something hidden below. Dedication plaques reference the New World Airport Commission, an organization that doesn't appear to exist anywhere else. Freemason symbols are carved into the capstone, placed by 2 grand lodges. But the real mystery isn't what's visible above ground. It's what hums and breathes beneath it. Security footage leaked in 2016 showed miles of underground tunnels beneath the airport, wider and taller than any baggage system needs to be. These aren't service corridors. They're built to move something much larger. The official explanation is an automated baggage system, one that famously failed for years after opening. But engineers have pointed out that the infrastructure far exceeds what such a system would require. There are sections sealed off with blast doors, reinforced walls, and ventilation systems designed for long-term occupancy. One construction crew reported drilling into a pre-existing tunnel, something that was already there before the airport was built. When they reported it, they were removed from the site and replaced. No one knows what they found or what happened to the footage they claim to have taken. Some believe the airport sits atop a massive underground bunker, part of a continuity of government plan in case of catastrophic disaster. Others think the tunnels connect to something older, something built during the Cold War when the government was obsessed with secrecy and survival. Denver is centrally located, far from coasts, surrounded by mountains, and sits exactly 1 mile above sea level. It's an ideal location for something meant to survive the end of the world. But Denver is just the beginning. Across the country, beneath major cities and forgotten outposts, there are tunnels. Some are acknowledged, most are not. In Los Angeles, beneath Bunker Hill and downtown, there's a network of passages that once connected speakeasies during Prohibition. But those tunnels go deeper than the 1920s, and some of them were never mapped. Urban explorers who ventured into them describe miles of brick corridors, some collapsed, some pristine, that seemed to lead nowhere. In certain sections, they found doorways welded shut from the inside. One group recorded audio of machinery running deep below, rhythmic and mechanical, though no records exist of any facility operating there. When they returned weeks later, the entrance had been sealed with concrete. City officials denied knowledge of it. In the 1930s, a man named Lizard People made headlines when he claimed to have discovered catacombs beneath Los Angeles, built by an advanced ancient civilization. He said he'd found evidence of gold deposits and a lost city beneath the modern streets. He obtained permits to excavate drilled test shafts and disappeared into financial ruin when funding dried up. His maps were confiscated, his findings dismissed as a hoax. But the tunnels he claimed to have entered were real. Workers have found them. And some of those tunnels contain architecture that doesn't match any known historical period. Smooth walls, no tool marks, carved at angles that shouldn't exist in hand-dug passages. The official story calls it geological anomaly. The people who've been inside call it something else. Further north, Beneath the streets of Seattle lies an entire buried city. After the Great Fire of 1889, the city rebuilt one story higher, leaving the old street level to rot beneath the new sidewalks. Today, tour guides walk visitors through portions of this underground world, stories of old saloons and opium dens. But there are sections they don't show you. Sections where the tunnels extend far beyond the burned district, into areas that were never part of old Seattle. Explorers have found staircases descending 3-4 levels down, deeper than the official underground. Some of these passages are shored up with modern materials, concrete and steel, installed long after the city was rebuilt. Why would anyone reinforce tunnels in an abandoned ghost town beneath the streets? One explorer found a steel door with a keypad lock, installed sometime in the last 20 years, deep in a section that's supposed to be forgotten. He photographed it, posted it online, and within days, the city threatened legal action. The photo was removed. He never went back, would you? If you found a locked door in a place that's supposed to be abandoned, would you try to open it? Or would you wonder what kind of machinery still needs power in a place the world forgot? The Cold War turned America into a country of secrets. Above ground, suburban neighborhoods and shopping malls. Below ground, cities designed to survive nuclear annihilation. During the 1950s and 60s, the government constructed hundreds of bunkers, command centers, and continuity of government facilities. Some were publicized. Most were not. Mount Weather in Virginia is one of the few that's been acknowledged, a massive underground complex built to house Congress and the President in the event of nuclear war. It's still operational today, still staffed, still maintained with a budget that's largely classified. But Mount Weather is just one node in a network. Beneath the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia, a bunker was hidden for decades, built to shelter the entire U.S. Congress. It was decommissioned in the 1990s after a journalist exposed it, but the construction companies that built it went on to build others. Facilities whose locations have never been confirmed. Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, NORAD's command center was carved out of solid granite, designed to withstand a direct nuclear strike. It's still active, still monitoring threats, and the tunnels inside stretch far beyond what's publicly acknowledged. Former personnel described levels that don't appear on any blueprint, areas designated as restricted even to those with top-secret clearance. One officer, speaking anonymously years after retirement, described it descending into a section of the mountain where the air felt different, colder, pressurized. He said the walls changed from rough-hewn rock to smooth concrete, and the lights were a different color, sterile white instead of the standard yellow. He was told to turn back. No explanation. When he asked later, his supervisor told him that some sections were maintained by contractors who didn't report to NORAD command. He never learned who they reported to. Across the Midwest, there are hundreds of decommissioned missile silos, remnants of the Cold War's nuclear arsenal. Most have been abandoned, sold off to private buyers, turned into homes or data centers. But some were never decommissioned. They were buried. In Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, there are silos that appear on old military maps but are no longer accessible. The entrances have been filled in, the land sold, the records sealed. Yet locals report seeing unmarked vehicles near these sites, government plates, arriving at night and leaving before dawn. Thermal imaging from satellites shows heat signatures beneath some of these locations, suggesting active facilities still operating below. One former contractor described working on a project in South Dakota in the late 1980s, installing ventilation systems in what he was told was a decommissioned silo. But the structure he worked in was far too large. It extended downward at least 10 levels, and he only saw the top 3. He said the lower levels required additional clearance, and armed guards were stationed at every checkpoint. He installed air filtration systems designed for long-term habitation, systems built to recycle air for months or even years. When he asked why a decommissioned silo needed that kind of infrastructure, he was told it was for storage. He didn't believe it then. He doesn't believe it now. The government has admitted to building subterranean cities. They've acknowledged deep underground command centers. But they've never explained how many exist or where they all are. Researchers have used FOIA requests to uncover some details, but the responses are heavily redacted, entire pages blacked out, maps removed. The official explanation is national security. But what kind of threat requires secrecy that lasts 70 years? In 2018, a hiker in Nevada stumbled across a ventilation shaft in the middle of the desert, miles from any known facility. The shaft was wide metal and emitted a low hum. He took photos and posted them online, asking if anyone knew what it was. Within hours, black SUVs arrived at the location. The hiker was questioned by federal agents and told the area was restricted. The shaft was cemented over within days. His photos were analyzed by engineers who confirmed the ventilation system was industrial grade, designed to move massive amounts of air. It suggested something large beneath the surface, something that needed to breathe. No facility appears on any map in that area. But the ground there is hollow. Seismic tests conducted by independent researchers have detected voids beneath the Nevada desert, massive cavities that suggest artificial construction. Some of these voids are miles long. The government has never commented. Beneath the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, there are rumors of a facility known only by a number. Site R27. It doesn't appear on any public record, but former military personnel reference it in passing, always in whispers. One retired officer described it as a continuity site, a place where key government functions could continue if the surface became uninhabitable. He said it was connected to other sites via underground transit systems, trains that moved through tunnels deep below the country. He claimed these systems were operational during the Cold War and never shut down. They were simply reclassified. Another source, a former engineer, described working on a project in the late 1990s that involved retrofitting old rail tunnels for modern use. He said the tunnels were far older than he expected, built with techniques that didn't match the era they were supposed to be from. The walls were smooth, almost fused, as if melted into place rather than carved or blasted. He asked his supervisor how they were made. The supervisor told him not to ask again. In Virginia, beneath the Pentagon, there are levels that have never been publicly acknowledged. The building officially has 5 floors above ground and 2 basement levels. But construction records suggest at least 7 levels below ground, and some reports indicate there may be more. During renovations after 9/11s, workers reported finding sealed corridors that didn't match the building's blueprints. Some of these corridors were lined with lead, suggesting shielding for radiation or electromagnetic interference. Others contained equipment that appeared decades old, still powered, still running. When workers asked what they'd found, they were told to seal it back up and not discuss it. Documents leaked years later referenced sub-basement level 4 and level 5 secure storage, areas that officially don't exist. So where do they go? And what's stored there that needs to be forgotten? Part 3. Not all underground tunnels were built by the government. Some were dug by people trying to escape it. Beneath the Appalachian Mountains, scattered across Tennessee and Kentucky, there are tunnels built by religious communes and survivalist groups during the height of Cold War paranoia. These weren't bunkers. They were sanctuaries. Communities believed the world above was doomed, corrupted, beyond saving. So they went below. One of the most disturbing is the remnants of a commune that existed near Pikeville, Kentucky, in the 1970s. The group called themselves the Descending Church. They believed salvation lay beneath the earth in darkness, away from the corrupting light of the surface world. Local records show they purchased land in 1972, built a small compound, and then vanished from public view. By 1980, the property was abandoned, the buildings burned, and the commune dissolved. But explorers who found the site discovered entrances to a tunnel system beneath the ruins. The tunnels are narrow, hand-dug, shored up with timber and scrap metal. They descend at steep angles, deeper than any basement, into chambers carved out of limestone. Inside these chambers, remnants of habitation, old mattresses, stacks of canned food long expired, and writings scrawled on the walls. Most of the writings are biblical verses, but some are stranger. We wait below. The surface is ash. Light is corruption. Dark is truth. Do not return. They watch the sun. The tunnels extend for nearly a mile, branching into smaller passages, some too narrow to fit through. At the deepest point, explorers found a chamber with a collapsed ceiling, rock and earth spilled across the floor. And on the far wall, a doorway had been carved, sealed from the inside with stones and cement. What were they trying to keep out, or keep in? No records exist of what happened to the members of the descending church. Some locals claim they simply left. Others say they never came back up. One old-timer who lived nearby in the 70s says he remembers seeing lights in the hills at night, lanterns moving in patterns like signals. He says the lights stopped in 1979, and after that, the compound went silent. When authorities finally investigated, they found no bodies, no signs of violence. Just empty tunnels and a group of people erased from history. Further west, beneath the New Mexico desert, there are tunnels associated with a cult known as the Church of the Final Earth. Group believed that a nuclear apocalypse was imminent and that only those who lived underground would survive God's judgment. They built a sprawling complex of tunnels and bunkers in the 1980s, funded by members who sold their possessions and donated everything to the cause. At its peak, over 200 people lived below ground, some for years at a time. They grew food in hydroponic systems, recycled water, and cut off almost all contact with the outside world. In 1993, the compound was raided by federal agents following reports of child abuse and weapons stockpiling. When agents arrived, they found the surface buildings empty. The tunnels below were a labyrinth. It took days to clear them, and when they did, they found evidence of long-term habitation, schoolrooms, medical facilities, even a chapel carved into the rock. But they also found things that didn't fit the narrative of a religious commune. Rooms lined with radio equipment, maps of military installations, and documents suggesting the group had been monitoring government communications for years. One room contained nothing but filing cabinets, filled with detailed records of government personnel, including home addresses and family information. The cult's leader, a man named Samuel Veit, was never found. Neither were 37 of his followers. The tunnels had exits that led miles away from the main compound, emerging in remote canyons where no roads existed. Some believe the missing members escaped and dissolved into society. Others think they went deeper, into tunnels that were never mapped. Because beneath the tunnels the agents found, there were signs of older construction. Passages that didn't match the crude work of the cult. Passages with walls too smooth, too precise. And at the lowest level they explored, they found a steel hatch embedded in the floor, locked with a mechanism they couldn't open. They brought in engineers, tried cutting tools, but the hatch wouldn't yield. Eventually, they sealed the entire complex and classified the details of what was found. The official report mentions none of this, but agents who were there have spoken anonymously, and their accounts are consistent. There was something below the cult's tunnels, something older. Would you have opened that hatch? Or would you have wondered what the cult had been listening for in the dark? In upstate New York, near the Finger Lakes, there's a network of tunnels that locals call the Whispering Halls. They were supposedly built in the 1800s as part of the Underground Railroad, used to smuggle escaped slaves to freedom. That's the accepted history. But people who've explored them say they go far deeper and far older than that. The tunnels are made of stone blocks, fitted together without mortar, in a style that doesn't match 19th century construction. Some sections have carvings that resemble indigenous symbols, but aged beyond what the timeline should allow. And deep within the system, explorers have found chambers with acoustics that distort sound in unnatural ways. Whispers echo for minutes. Footsteps sound like they're coming from every direction at once. One group brought recording equipment into the deepest chamber and captured something they couldn't explain. A low-frequency hum, below the range of human hearing, but detectable on their instruments. When they analyzed the recording later, they found patterns in the hum, repeating intervals that almost resembled language. They brought the recording to an audio engineer, who told them it was impossible. The patterns were too regular, too structured to be natural, but there was no source, no equipment that could have generated it. The group returned to the chamber to investigate further. Only 2 of them came back out. They claimed the others had gone deeper, into a passage they hadn't noticed before, and never returned. Search parties found no trace of them. The passage they described was never found. The tunnels were sealed by the state shortly after, citing structural instability. But locals say you can still hear the hum if you stand near the sealed entrance at night. A sound that shouldn't exist, coming from a place that's supposed to be empty. The deeper you go into these stories, the more connections emerge. Patterns that suggest coordination, secrecy that spans decades, and infrastructure that far exceeds what's been publicly acknowledged. Some researchers believe the United States has built an entire shadow network beneath the country, a system of tunnels, bases, and transit routes that connect key locations from coast to coast. They call it the subcontinental infrastructure. And if it exists, it would be the largest construction project in human history, built in total secrecy. The theory isn't as fringe as it sounds. Declassified documents confirm that during the Cold War, the government explored deep underground construction on a massive scale. Project Greek Island, Project Hideaway, and dozens of others created bunkers and command centers beneath the surface. But those were just the ones that were acknowledged. Contractors who worked on classified projects in the 1970s and 80s described being flown to remote locations, working underground for months, and never knowing where they were. They described tunneling equipment far more advanced than what was publicly available, machines that could bore through solid rock at unprecedented speeds. Some described seeing completed tunnels that stretched for miles, lit with electric lights, wide enough to drive vehicles through. When they asked where the tunnels led, they were told it was classified. One contractor, speaking decades later, described working on a project in the late 1980s somewhere in the Southwest. He was told he was helping build a storage facility for hazardous materials. But the facility he worked in had living quarters, medical bays, and infrastructure designed for hundreds of people. It had rail lines that extended into tunnels that were already completed, tunnels that disappeared into darkness in both directions. He asked where the trains went. No one would tell him. He worked there for 6 months and never saw sunlight once. When his contract ended, he was flown out at night, blindfolded and paid in cash with an NDA that carried criminal penalties for violation. He never learned where he'd been. But he saw the machinery, the scale, the precision. He knows it wasn't a storage facility. Independent researchers have tried to map these alleged tunnels using seismic data, satellite imaging, and leaked documents. Some claim to have identified patterns of activity beneath the country, strange tremors that suggest tunneling activity, thermal signatures that indicate underground facilities. One analysis focused on a series of seismic events recorded between 2005 and 2010 across Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. The events were too regular to be natural earthquakes, and they occurred in areas with no mining or drilling operations. The pattern suggested something moving underground or excavation happening in controlled bursts. Geologists consulted on the data said it was consistent with tunnel boring, but on a scale that would require enormous resources. When journalists asked the government about it, they were told the seismic data was misinterpreted and no such activity was occurring. But the tremors continued. In 2012, a construction crew in Missouri broke through into a tunnel while excavating for a new highway. The tunnel was concrete-lined, round, and extended in both directions beyond the reach of their lights. It wasn't on any city map. No utility company claimed it. The state brought in engineers to investigate, and within days, federal agents arrived and took over the site. The tunnel was sealed with concrete. The construction crew was interviewed and released, and the incident was never mentioned in public records. One crew member, speaking anonymously, said the tunnel had rail tracks inside, old but maintained, and the air smelled like machine oil. He said it looked like it had been used recently. The highway construction was delayed by 3 months, and when it resumed, the route had been changed to avoid the area entirely. So where do these tunnels go? Some researchers believe they connect military installations, bunkers, and key infrastructure sites, creating a hidden transit network that allows movement and communication without surface detection. Others think they're part of a continuity of government system, a way to evacuate and sustain leadership in the event of catastrophe. And some believe there's something older, something that was discovered rather than built, because not all of the tunnels match modern construction techniques. There are sections, deep beneath the Southwest, where tunnels have been found with walls that show no tool marks, no drill patterns, no evidence of human excavation. Smooth, vitrified surfaces that look almost melted into place. Geologists have examined samples and found minerals fused at temperatures that shouldn't occur naturally underground. Some have speculated that advanced boring techniques were used, perhaps nuclear-powered drills that superheat rock as they tunnel. But no records exist of such equipment being deployed, and the tunnels themselves appear on no blueprints, no government documents, no contractor logs. In Utah, near the Dugway Proving Grounds, hikers have reported finding ventilation shafts in the desert, similar to the one in Nevada. These shafts are always in remote areas, miles from any road, and they emit a faint vibration that can be felt through the ground. One hiker measured the airflow from a shaft and calculated that it would require a cavity of at least several million cubic feet to generate that much ventilation. Something enormous was breathing below. When he reported it to authorities, he was told the area was restricted military land and he shouldn't have been there. The shaft was buried shortly after. There are dozens of similar reports, scattered across Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Ventilation shafts, access points, and strange vibrations in areas that officially contain nothing. Maps created by researchers plotting these locations show a pattern, a network that spans the Southwest, connecting military bases, national labs, and areas of geological interest. If you drew lines between these points, they would form a web beneath the desert, hidden in plain sight. And at the center of that web sits Nevada, home to Area 51, the Nevada test site, and hundreds of square miles of restricted land where the public is forbidden to go. What's beneath that desert? The government has conducted over 900 nuclear tests there, most of them underground. Each test created a massive cavity, a hollowed-out space deep below the surface. Some of those cavities are large enough to hold buildings. What if they were never abandoned? What if the tests were cover for something else? Excavation on a scale it would be impossible to hide above ground, but invisible below. Former workers at the test site have described seeing tunnels during their time there. Tunnels that led away from the test chambers into areas they weren't authorized to enter. Some described hearing trains deep below, moving through passages that shouldn't exist. One technician, interviewed years after leaving, said he once saw a map in his supervisor's office that showed a tunnel network stretching from Nevada into Utah and Arizona. He asked what it was for. The supervisor closed the map and told him to forget he'd seen it. Would you have forgotten? Or would you have started asking why a nuclear test site needs tunnels that lead hundreds of miles away? There are places beneath this country that no map will ever show you. Doors that will never open for civilians. Tunnels that will never appear in any public record. The infrastructure exists. The evidence is scattered but consistent. Across decades, across states, the same patterns emerge: secrecy, scale, and silence. The official explanations are always reasonable. Baggage systems, bunkers, storage, Cold War relics. But the explanations never quite cover the details. The tunnels that go too deep, the construction that exceeds necessity, the contractors who are paid to forget. What's below us isn't just history. It's active, maintained, powered, occupied. And the more you look, the more you realize that the surface world we live in is just one layer of a much deeper reality. The government has confirmed that continuity of government plans exist, that deep underground command centers are operational, that infrastructure is in place to sustain leadership during catastrophic events. But they've never explained the full extent, never shown the maps, never acknowledged what independent researchers keep finding. Because the truth isn't just that there are tunnels beneath us. It's that we were never supposed to know how many or where they lead. The people who built them signed NDAs with criminal penalties. The locations are classified at the highest levels. The funding is buried in black budgets that no one can audit. And every time someone gets close, the doors close, the sites are sealed, the evidence disappears. What does that tell you? It tells you that whatever is below is worth protecting, worth hiding, worth maintaining in total secrecy for generations. Maybe it's survival. Maybe it's continuity. Maybe it's something we're not ready to understand, but it's there. Beneath Denver, where the blue horse watches the plains with eyes like warning lights. Beneath Los Angeles, where tunnels spiral into darkness that predates the city above. Beneath the Ozarks, the deserts, the mountains, and the plains. A network built in shadow, running like veins beneath the skin of the country. And the people who know the truth aren't talking. They're underground, in rooms with filtered air and electric lights, far from the chaos of the surface. They're in places where the sun never reaches, where the sound of the world above is just a distant memory. And they're waiting. For what? We don't know. But they built these places for a reason, and that reason is still classified. The question isn't whether the tunnels exist. They do. The question is why we're not supposed to know about them. Why every access point is sealed. Why every leak is shut down. Why every witness is silenced. What's down there that requires that level of control? Some believe it's protection, a failsafe in case the surface world collapses. Others believe it's preparation for something the government knows is coming but won't tell us. And a few believe it's something older, something that was found rather than built, and that all the secrecy is to keep us from asking the wrong questions. Maybe the truth is all of those things. Maybe the tunnels serve multiple purposes, layers of secrets stacked on top of older secrets. But one thing is certain. We're living on top of a world we can't see. A world that hums and breathes and operates in silence, and no one with clearance is willing to tell us what it's for. You can feel it sometimes if you pay attention. The low vibration beneath the city street, the hum coming from a ventilation grate, the echo of something moving below. Most people ignore it. Background noise, urban ambience. But now you know what it might mean. Now you know that beneath your feet there could be miles of tunnel, chambers carved from stone, and doors that lead to places the world forgot. And you'll never know for sure. Not unless you go looking. But if you do, remember this. The people who built these places didn't want them found, and they went to extraordinary lengths to make sure they stayed hidden. So if you find a sealed door in a tunnel that shouldn't exist, if you hear machinery running in a place that's supposed to be abandoned, if you stumble across a map that shows tunnels where no tunnels should be, ask yourself one question. Do you really want to know what's on the other side? Or is some knowledge better left buried in the dark where it was meant to stay? The tunnels are real. The mystery is unsolved. And the truth is still underground, waiting in silence. If this story made you question what lies beneath the surface, consider subscribing. There are more hidden places, more unanswered questions, and more stories the world would rather you didn't hear. But we'll keep digging, even if no one wants us to.